just when you thought it was safe to go onto iTunes. This is Next Level Guy, the only website that makes self-development as fun as going to the movies. It's time to take the red pill and escape the Matrix.
What's happening, guys? It's time for another episode of the Next Level Guy Show podcast with your favourite tutor, Ian Dawson-Mackay. Next Level Guy is a go-to men's interview, interest and improvement website where I quiz the experts to find out the hacks, tips, methods and protocols that you can implement in your own life to take it to the next level and live happier, healthier, wealthier, sexier and so much more. Today's guest is Kenneth Play. Kenneth is an international sex expert and sex educator. He went from a deeply insecure Asian immigrant to 8 million views on Pornhub and has also been named the world's greatest sex hacker by GQ magazine. Kenneth develops sex techniques to help couples learn new ways to connect and overcome challenges in the bedroom. His newest course features over 71 videos and 12 hours of content and was described by AskMen magazine recently as having at least one nugget of sexual learning you've almost certainly never encountered before, if not several. His teaching has been described as a mashup of Bruce Lee's mixed martial arts approach and Tim Ferriss' 80-20 rule. He's worked with Dr. Zhana Vrangalova, I hopefully said that correct, to conduct the world's largest survey on squirting. He's also worked with Pamela Madsen at the Back to the Body Sensual Retreats for Women, and he's been a featured presenter at New York University as well as San Jose State University. He's developed his life to empowering couples to close the orgasm gap and experience the best connected sex of their lives. In this interview, we discuss his story, sex education, sex hacks, how to make true connections with others and give true pleasure to all, and how to hack your sex life to become the best lover and partner possible. And now, let's get to the interview. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I was really keen to get you on because I love your approach to hacking life and hacking fitness and hacking sex, etc. You're a big fan of Tim Ferriss and the 80-20 analysis and things like that. But for people who don't maybe know who you are, could you just give just a quick intro about who you are and why you're so well known?
Is it difficult? No, but it's still so hard for me to get used to that because I grew up so insecure, and I'm probably the world's most unlikely sex educator and porn star. In fact, that I just shot a thing in London, and I joked that I'm their diversity hire, but I would just I grew up really not feeling that my sexuality is expressed, and being an Asian immigrant in America, like I feel like Asian male sexuality is so underrepresented. But I've always been a very sexual person, so I decided if I get really fit, then I would become girls would like me more. But as I got more fit and talking to more girls, I still have a lot of internal insecurity that I wanted to overcome. So I decided to maybe I could hack my sex life like I did with my fitness life. So I decided to do that. And one thing led to the other. I found a sex positive community. I went to some sex parties and I started to nerd out on this stuff. And I became a sex educator because I was really passionate about how do you improve that part of your life. And my message seems to really appeal to a lot of people. And I also, in that process, I also co-founded a sex positive intentional community in Brooklyn, and that picked up a lot of press as well. So all of them together kind of helped me become, the things that I'm currently doing with my career.
And so you've mentioned in another interview that you were initially kind of the analytical approach you have to getting into shape, and then you start getting interested in sort of sex, and you thought about looking at ways to hack it. Was this something that you just did for your own personal view, or did you always kind of think that there was a market, a business there? What kind of drew you into seeing this as a potential coaching ability?
Well, when I was in the fitness industry, when someone has a fitness goal, they want to improve that part of their life, there's not stigmas that you go to the gym, hire a trainer, go to a spinning class, join CrossFit. Doesn't matter what people do. But when it comes to sexuality, not only that it's really hard to find a good sex education that is explicit to the point and useful. Mm-hmm. On top of it, there's a whole stigma about learning. So if you have to learn about sex, then there's something wrong with you or you're not good. And then we have this like really bad myth about sex, that sex is supposed to be this innate talent that you have. So either you're born really you're good, or you are just that terrible at it. There's no way to improve it. And we have this overemphasis on just your penis size and how hard you could, how long you could stay hard, and how long you could last, that determines what makes a good lover. And in fact, that those things are creating a huge orgasm gap for women. So women are not satisfied with the sex they're having with most straight men. And yet we value the wrong thing. And then when I looked at when I want to improve my sex life at that time, I was like, this shit is terrible. I can't really find a lot of good stuff. Because of my dyslexia, reading is very difficult. So it's really hard to translate books like, She Comes First into practical like practice. So I was trying to figure out how to like deconstruct that into like a learning modality that works for me. And ironically, when I got introduced to the whole sex party scene, watching people have sex live was the best way that I could have learned. And I was like, maybe I could start doing that. And that's how the whole sort of the desire for sex ed became a passion. And then I got obsessive with how people acquire, sex skills, like the way that I did for fitness.
So if we were to sort of start looking at in terms of, people listening who maybe want to start improving their sex life, start hacking their attraction, hacking their ability in bed and all that sort of thing, would you believe the philosophy that, to be attractive, you've got to find yourself attractive, you've got to love the person you are? How do you work with somebody to actually get them into the acceptance of the mindset that they deserve better sex, that they deserve to have more sex, better quality sex?
That's a tough question to answer, because if I think everybody is worthy of love, but it's also it's based on people's like their behavior and who they are in the world. So I don't think that like people have born the right to pursue it, but I don't think people build actual self-confidence by not doing anything. So the way that I've seen people who built like they're confident with their body and fitness is like by engaging in a lifestyle, right? Not necessarily where they at exactly. So you don't need a six-pack necessarily to feel good about your body, but the way you take care of yourself is important. So when people are investing in educating themselves with their sexuality and feel more connected with them, feeling more comfortable with their sexual self, I think building those are actually true confidence, rather than you think, rather I deserve it or not, I think the worthiness is there, but I think confidence is earned. So it's a little bit different. And, so it depends on the person, I really think.
Because that's the problem I find with a lot of people. It's like, it's trying to get through their head that they do deserve to feel loved, to have good quality sex. They don't have to just put up with it. It's that you can get a true connection with partners, and that even if it's just a bit of fun on the side, as I say. But what do you think is the worst? Like, what do you see most guys you work with going wrong when with these sort of clients? Are there standard things that you notice that they tend to do? Is it the way they're approaching it? Is it the way are they in their head and not giving their body more, feeling it? Is it lack of enthusiasm, not giving the pleasure to the woman? Because I really love your kind of focus. It's on the woman's pleasure, and that's what I found when I looked up a lot of sort of sex hacking and stuff. A lot of it was on what the guy gets, like the pickup community. There was very little on, I'm always been in my work, like I love like pleasuring women, but I love being like seeing them enjoying it. And too many guys approach it from their own physical needs. Is that the problem with a lot of sex education today? It's guy orientated. We're not thinking about giving it to the pleasure to the partner.
Well, I don't think men are like inherently selfish when it comes to sexuality. I think one of the biggest myths that we have about sexuality, that when we went through this like Victorian era when, sex is like this behind closed door thing, during the different waves of feminism, it became sex is natural. So natural becomes as something that is not skill based, that is not something that you grow and learn, or like have a growth mindset about it. And when they approach sex, what we talked about earlier, they overly emphasize on just like their penis size and how hard and how long they could last, rather than their mutually satisfying, pleasurable sex. Their basic concept of their orgasm gap, where majority of women who engage in their first time hookup normally don't orgasm, and that's kind of sad, right? So what I learned from, like, if I want the quality of my sex life to really improve, if I am having sex with women who are getting tremendous pleasure out of it, of course they want to fuck me. It's like when the restaurant is delicious, people go. So they have to. So if you're there and you don't have the ability to provide the pleasure that you want to experience, it's just a bad bargain. And what I have learned in my life is that the more like satisfying partner that I have, the better my sex life. So I think that equation is what to focus on, is that if you could give, if you have the ability to give, if you have value in the world, you tend to get back the same value, if not more.
So how would you begin working with people on this? Because a lot of people would classify their sex life as normal or vanilla. And, is that a dangerous thing of giving it a term? Because, it's more about the persons involved, their kinks, their histories, how the connection they've got between them. Do we do more good or bad by putting a label on it? Surely there is no such thing as normal sex.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that people seek for normal is a sense of acceptance, that they don't want to be like some type of freaks and outlier, that they feel like their unique desires rejected by society or people. So that desire to fit in is very strong. It's a sense of belonging. However, what we fail to, I guess, as a society understand is biology loves, variability. Like, we all varies in our, just like our bodies. Some people are a better power lifter than marathon runner. You look at everybody's physical faces and height. There's such a large range of distribution, and yet in sex, you're trying to fit everybody into one class. So nature loves the diversity, and yet we're trying to fit sexuality into a very narrow box. And usually is based on like click rates on popular porn site now, because that's what most people see as sex, right? What you see is kind of gives you this, you're mind blind by what the diversity is. I was very fortunate and lucky to have a pretty like abundant sex life, and also to do this professionally. I probably been with more than 1,000 people. It's so diverse. Everybody's slightly different, just like everyday life. People prefer different food. They adapt to exercise differently. So the dangerous part is normal. And when you are not normal, then you think you are a freak, or you like something, no one else would like. It really just like any given bell curve distribution. There are some people are more on either side, and a majority of people fit in the middle. So embracing your unique expression and go towards what drives your arousal and what's pleasurable for you, it will give you a satisfying sex life. And I think most people seek for, they would find a partner who appreciate and love their unique sexual expression.
Because this is why I love your stuff. It's, you actually look at it from a deeper level than just some of these other sites where it's like lift her legs up, push up cushion under her butt. It's, you actually look at it from a very kind of deep psychological level, and I'm really impressed at the way that you kind of fixed clients emotionally and mentally as much as physically. But do you notice when you work with your clients, is there a difference in their attitudes, and like their approaches to sex, their acceptance to sex in the different cultures, races, and things like that? Or is that a myth that, certain cultures are more repressed towards sex, while some are more outgoing? Is that a kind of myth that doesn't hold true when you work with clients?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely this, we are a combination of nature and nurture, so there's no argument there. Like, there are some people that are born like that more conservative culture works better for them, and there's people who are like, are more sensation seeking, so which is, like how how your body responds to dopamine. Like you get a higher reward system. So then you have your baseline, who you are, right, how you're born, and then depending on the culture you live in and your social group, right, like what does your immediate family, to your peer group, to your society, to your religion tells you, and all those things combined with your own habits, like how you do things, form your particular like unique sexual identity at that moment. So it really depends. Like a lot of times when I work with clients, it's more about deconstructing their history, their value system, right? What they believe is good or bad, and their desire, what turns them on, and then also their conditioning to kind of give them a perspective to see where they really want to go. But ultimately, what we find in research and all the things I've learned is helping people be more of themselves. So I don't teach my client to be more like me. It's more like I'm just a guide for their own self-development. Do a lot of like, here's some science and technique that could really help, but everybody will find their own move, within that structure.
I love that. I love the way you look at it. It's, I can only find outpouring of like people just so grateful to you for what you do and how you've opened them up into this kind of environment. But how do you start working with somebody and deconstructing the bullshit, the feelings, the childhood issues, the emotional baggage? How can you start working through that to start getting help? Helping people find what they truly desire and what really excites them, what really turns them on.
Well, there's two sides to this. First, I'm not a sex therapist, right? So I think what a sex therapist does is extremely important, and that's like dealing with like trauma. And what I worked on is more on the coaching side, right? I'm like taking someone and help them improve on whatever area they're in. And I'm worked with Pamela Madsen, who is one of my mentor, who runs Back to the Body. And on all those women's retreat, when I get to do some of the hands-on sex education stuff, what I have find is that I explain the foundation, like the science of it, right? So like in our nervous system, either we are like inhibiting ourselves in a inhibitory system versus it excites us, arouses us. So if I help them identify some of those beliefs and thoughts that does not serve them, I just tell them, as long as you choose to think this thing, it's not going to turn you on, right? So how I deconstruct it, I just tell them, here's all the things that you're gonna have to put together in order for you to experience the most pleasurable sex that you could possibly experience, and see where they're blocked. Because a lot of time it's not to help my client move faster, but it's to tell them to leave, like to not press on the brake when they want to experience good sex. So it's like finding what really drives them, and learn for them to pleasure block themselves, and then learn to be more mindful in their experience and be more technically skilled, on experiencing those things or giving. So it depends on if I'm talking about helping someone to be a better giver or a better receiver. Those are two different skills.
Because that's really really impressive, the way that you do that. And I love that you have that sort of support with like your fellow coach to kind of work through the different sides, because this is where I was a bit unsure of where your coaching kind of did, how much it went into the psychology sort of side of things. And you seem to kind of open people up, and it was interesting, the two-pronged attack that you have for that. When you're dealing with like their clients, you must get a lot of data points. Do you get a lot of feedback from women on the types of things that men do that they don't like, that they wish they did more? Do you see a collective kind of grouping of data that shows majority of women want more aggressive sex, or they want men to be more vocal, or does it just depend on the woman and her attitudes or kinks and things like that?
Before I jump into that, which I have I don't want to lose that question, I have a great answer for it. On the last question you asked me is, there's not like, there's a difference between telling people like every sex educator tell you to communicate, right? Like it's important for communication, but they don't teach the person how to do that, or like specific hacks to make that happen. So I think what makes their coaching effective is that when you could help your client identify one of their issues. So maybe this person is distracted, like being distracted in your pleasure is what, causing the issue. Then I give them mindfulness drills. Maybe they're focusing on their breath. Maybe they doing like a spanking, a BDSM that like hack their nervous system to paying attention. So it's not just like, here's what's wrong, but here's the thing that potentially could help you shift that really quickly. That's where the hacking lies. And as far as your second question, when it comes to what are the trends that people really experience, it's definitely different for every woman, right? Every couple, their unique situation. However, thanks to some of the latest research, like from OMGS, where they interview 19,000 women to talk about preference, you would know, like, for example, that maybe 36% of women would prefer the first 2 inches of their near the vaginal opening on the upper right wall, that they would respond more likely to respond to it than if you go on the left and a little bit lower. So then you will sort of like help deconstruct or like learning your partner's preference much quicker by going to the highest probability stuff first. So to me, it's like sex hacking is more like card counting when you're playing poker, when you're just betting based on percentages because it's more likely. And also, so that's like it makes the trial and error process a lot faster. I think that's how we game the math part. So it really depends.
Because it's definitely something that I've come across where friends have, discussed like falling out with ex-partners, and it's, we weren't compatible, or, I wanted more sex than him and things like that. And I just find it really strange that, somebody that you could share yourself intimately with, we can't, discuss things like that. But how do you think is there a way that you can actually remove the ego? Like, how can couples communicate their desires? They want to bring another person in. They want to try new kink. How do you even start that approach without upsetting the other person? Because some people tie their self-esteem up with their sexuality, with thinking they're great in bed and things like that. How do we touch
the first thing is that it is really about creating a culture where people feel that it's safe for them to communicate. So it's having the skill to create that sort of culture and container to do those things. And there's definitely methods and practices that different sex educators recommend on how to approach those subjects. But you have to also let go some of the myths and false belief. So if you have, it's about being available to absorb something new. Like you have to kind of empty that cup before you could pour something in, and then you have to develop a agreement between partners that I want to share something that I feel very vulnerable with you, and this is how it's gonna go. But you also have to have this culture of responsibility. My feelings are mine. If I blame you, then it doesn't work. Just like if people are suck at relationship, then nothing works. So I think it's actually educating people what type of relationship culture, right, and communication style that will enhance their sexual experiences and pleasure. But I think whatever makes people communicate well sexually would help them throughout their entire relationship, because then you could really share, and be supportive and understanding.
Because that's something I was very interested in, was the building that emotional connection that you've talked about in other, in your like amazing products. How do we do that away from the bedroom, build that connection? How do you start that debate? Like, because I would find it, as I've got older, I'm probably more extreme than what some people would consider, sort of vanilla sex, but there's far worse in some people's opinions than that, like if you watch certain kinds of porn and things like that. But there's certain people I know that I would just be interested to discuss changing things and trying new things, and there's some people that would definitely not be. Is this a case that you Like, are you into the whole foreplay, giving compliments? Do you work with them outside of the bedroom,
I
or is
do
it more
both. I
just
really like the
building that
hands-on part. I
connection?
think that's very effective. So I could really coach, because I don't only coach their behavior, but I coach their beingness, like how they're being. If they're being um if they're being anxious, I could coach them to build more confidence. If it's like also like there's a mental state that person is in. However, outside the bedroom, I think that's really the space to really have a lot of those deeper emotional conversation. But sexuality is a multi-layer sandwich. You have the like physical part, right, which is biology, physiology, and then you have the emotional, relational context that we put into sex. So in order for it to be pleasurable, all those things kind of have to line up, and there's meanings behind how people interpret those experiences. So I think one of the way you brought up this question, I think one of the things is that people need to educate themselves and also role model the behavior they want to inspire in their relationship. So if they want to inspire vulnerability, right, and courage, then you are willing to be that first for the partner, so they could experience you being that way, and therefore you're able to encourage that new set of behavior. If both people are being mean and nasty and blaming, then you're probably role modeling that, and you can't create something different. So I think there's a lot of personal responsibility that goes into it.
I love that, because when I was younger, I probably didn't have the emotional ability to be open first. If we got into discussions and things, I could happily discuss it, but I couldn't go in and say, this isn't working for me, or I always felt like I was holding back. And as I've got older, I think, as people mature, we kind of start accepting who we are more, and it's a real shame that we don't get better sort of sex education when we're younger.
Mm-hmm.
We just get taught how babies are made, but we don't get taught how to truly connect with somebody, how to be open and vulnerable and emotional with somebody, and it's a real shame in that sense.
Yeah.
Because that's why. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Yeah, it's a real shame.
Well, I was going to say it's a real shame, because that's what I loved about your products, was because you don't just show the anatomy and how to flick, tamper, etc. You actually go on how to build that connection, how to connect with a person during it, how to use vocal tonality, how to build a connection, and look into using eye contact and making them feel comfortable and happy and stuff like that. I mean, your videos and products are amazing, and that's what I really liked about it. Was guys, we tend to go for the physical stimulation, where women, they need that emotional connection, and the fact that you pulled both of them together so well. I mean, what do you think's wrong with sex education and the whole, the way we're taught it at the moment?
I don't know if there's something like necessarily wrong with sex education by itself. I think is that most people are using pornography as sex education. Now, I am not like the anti-porn person here. In fact, that I think porn is very important as a arousal tool for some people, and for some people is not like it's really the individual, but is when you're using porn as your source of sex ed, it's like watching professional wrestling or watching the Fast and Furious learning how to drive. Like that is the bigger issue. And with sex education by itself, what I see, there's some of the censorship that like sex educators decided that feel like they have to censor the actual education. So why do I have to why can't I teach the thing that is the most natural about that topic? Like if I'm doing a cooking show, I'm not going to use like props to do the cooking.
Yeah.
Like I want it, you got to cook. So when I taught fitness, I'm not going to, if I'm teaching someone how to ride a bike, I'm not going to make a fake bike to tell them to ride it. Like they just have to do I have to engage them in the actual activity. So that's why I'm so like anti-censoring when it comes to sex education, because that's how people really learn. They have to see it, they have to feel it. And I see tremendous potential in making videos, at this current time, but also see a lot of potential in virtual reality when it comes to sex education. So they could experience it. And I think the experience, like how I did at, sex parties and other real life sex demos that I've seen, that is really transformative.
So how does this change, or does it, between say you go to a sex party or you're with your girlfriend or wife? Does your approach to sex with partners change between a partner or a hookup, or is the same kind of skills and techniques that you teach viable for both? How do you keep one of them casual and the other build that connection with your partner? Do you mix it up? Do you change it, or do you want to build that connection to give the best sex? Is there any difference depending on the connection between partners?
I think it's context dependent. However, when it comes to even the most casual of casual sex, I think casual intimacy is important, because caring for another human and want, desiring mutual satisfaction is important. So you don't need to be a dick, right, in order for you to have casual sex. I think it's actually it sets a really low bar, and then unfortunately for the guys who's fucking this up, it creates experiences that women are not being satisfied. They're not treated well, so they're walking away from wanting to engage in casual sex, even if they crave it and they desire it, because the experience is not good. So I think it's a true disservice to everyone. So I think everyone deserves to be treated with respect and kindness, and the other person invested in that person's pleasure, like mutually satisfying. So I think connection is a baseline. Now, connection doesn't mean that you're making some type of romantic commitment. It just means that you are connecting. So unfortunately we don't teach people that much intimacy skills, because we also in a culture where we feel like intimacy must lead into something different than what it is, like they must, want something more. So we don't necessarily have developed the right culture for the level of connection, and technology has drive us a little further apart as well.
I love that, because that's something I've struggled with. Is I've had one night stands that have turned into 8-month relationships, whereas if I'm with somebody, I want to be with them. You know what I mean? I hate this pickup stuff of, oh, she's a 6 and oh, he's an 8 and all this kind of stuff, and negging and that sort of stuff. And I just think, why would you want to tear somebody down? Why would you want to just use them for a jump and go off? It's like you said, is the guys who treat this as like they're but things to be used are fucking this up, and it's absolutely disgusting the way that some guys approach it. And I couldn't understand why some people kind of went, oh no, you can't let them sleep over, oh you can't make them breakfast because they'll start falling for you and all this kind of thing. It's so refreshing to see your sort of viewpoint on that, because the whole pickup industry has kind of gone way OTT. I mean, what's your opinion on like pickup, red pill, all that kind of thing?
It's pretty fucked up. I think it's important to teach men social skills and how to be, how to work with a given mating market depending on the type of sex and relationship you want. There's a really good book by Jeffrey it's called Mate. So I think there's good version of pickup, like education or like dating advice. However, like generally, if you're trying to game and manipulate using pickup technique, so you could manipulate and take advantage of someone, that's the stuff that we're trying to like change and don't create that behavior. And there's also some like myths about women's sexuality versus men, right? Like how the sexes are different. Women are more like desiring, emotional connection, and men just want to fuck. That's not inherently true. There's, women want sex, like if not more than I think men, they're just not getting good sex. So if they are getting the good sex and you treat them well, and not in necessarily like trying to wife everyone, that's not the goal. In fact, that I think a lot of women would think any good sex they have would turn into a lifetime relationship as a nightmare. So it really depends on the women and it really depends on the guy. But the myth, right, the structure that we have set up creates that. But, then there is people who have different needs and desires. So we can say all men are like this, all women are like this, some are like this, and some are like that. So it really depends on their individual need. And we also I think this might be a little bit long-winded, but we also approaching a different time, like different point in history, where you are having more of a sex positive culture. You have birth control, like pretty down to a science that people could manage not getting pregnancy. There's better ways to manage your sexual health, and there's a different society structure where for different part of the world, where you're not depending on like your primary romantic relationship to secure your lifestyle and your financial well-being or your life worthiness. So as those things shift, different people would have different priority when it comes to why they choose to engage in a sexual activity. I think we're empowering a lot of women to enjoy sex for sex sake. So that's why I think it's such an important time for men to develop those sex skills, because they could really, like, women are choosing to fuck you because you're a good lay, not, only because you're a potential mate for a provider. So the game have shifted.
I interviewed Alice Little. I don't know if you know her. She's on the Moonlight Bunny Ranch.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, she was amazing, and we really got into like sort of the psychological barriers and things like that. And there's something she said about, it's like women enjoy sex. We have this myth where guys want it more, and all this, like, there's all these kind of preset. It's almost like instructions that we feed people, and the codes well out of date. We forget that women enjoy a good sex as much as guys. They don't want to date every single guy they go with, but it's almost like we're constantly told this, and it's like a challenge to shift it off. And some people don't, and they never truly enjoy the experience of like good sex, good technique, good connection, and truly getting what they desire. And I think that's really sad.
But it's also a good time, as those things shift. I think the early adapter for the guys who are like learning that this is how they could see the world a little differently, if they will be the one who's like winning on this early stage. Because if you start to see, the people who adapt to AI or any new technology, they will be the first one to kind of get there. So the bar is set so low right now. So for the one who's like getting it now, it's like get in now. Like at the
I mean, that's because I was listening to interviews with you, and you just sound such a nice guy, and such there's I can understand why people connect with you, and you get on so well. And I loved like your Instagram, because you don't just go on about like, I was banging this one, I was doing this one, like some of these other ones. You actually go on to, you talk about reading, like, to better yourself. You talk about building that connection, things like that. What can I, like, for our single guys listening, or guys who are wanting to improve their sex life and build that connection with a partner, what would you start people doing? Is it a case of going to the gym? Are looks important? Should they be reading? Should we be doing more household chores? Should we, try to take the stress off our partners? What's that first step that any guy can do to start bettering themselves and making themselves a better man for their partner or future partners?
I think adapting a growth mindset and investing in yourself and develop the quality that you want to attract. So like if you want it depends on mate that you want, if they're the girl that you really want, like, obsessed with like looks, then work on that. It depends on who you want to attract, I think, ultimately. But I don't think anyone would regret being great at sex or invest in themselves. Like, you don't go like, oh, I'm too rich, I'm too fit, I'm too anything. So I think it's actually choosing to make a commitment to take responsibility of your own life and develop the values that you value and work on those things. And I think ultimately when people choose to take on that responsibility, they feel good about themselves because of their hard work and their motivation and their own ambition. So if you sit at home and don't take care of yourself and you are angry that women don't want to fuck you, like, tough shit, honestly.
Because that's the thing, though. Guys are sitting there. What is it they say? Guys always think they could have got the girl and they could win every fight. It's like that kind of belief. It's like it's just safer to think that than try, because we don't want to harm our fragile egos. You go. So what have you ever done an 80-20 analysis on like how you were having sex? Were there certain techniques that you found really worked well for you? Because I think I heard you say you were trying to see what work would give you the best return for the least effort.
Definitely when it comes to like applying the 80-20 rule, and that's how I actually developed my course to like I don't want to teach general sex education, like here's everything like a encyclopedia of sex. I just really took the 20% of the most useful technique in all the categories, so you have all the baseline skill to kind of adapt to any lovers that you desire. And that's how the whole thing is developed, like a video game where you have a skill tree, so you could work on specific thing. Maybe you really like kinky sex, maybe you really like anal, maybe you like squirting, or whatever the case may be. You just know that you have all those skills, so when you are approaching a lover, you could pick the right moves, and there's no like one perfect way to do it. So I teach more of a philosophy of it being adaptive rather than, this works for everyone. I think that's one of the biggest myth that, I'm going to try this one trick pony thing on everybody. It doesn't work. And if it worked for your last 3 girlfriends, it doesn't mean it's going to work for your next date,
Because that's what initially scared the crap out of me, was when after the first couple, I thought I had some killer moves, and then it didn't really work for the next one, and I was kind of like, oh fuck, what do you do here? And I can imagine many guys have their 4, like it's like John Cena of their sex life. It's the 5 moves of doom, and it's literally a doom, And how do we start building that sort of adaptivity? Can guys do certain things like building the sensitivity of their touch, strengthening of their tongue muscles, how can we work on this without being in that moment? Can you work on this?
Well, there's definitely like proprioception skill, as in like how you move, just like an athlete. Those skills could definitely develop your sensitivity to touch, your ability to kind of like pay attention to what your partner is experiencing. And there's also like, for the receiver, when you're touching someone, sometimes you could do the perfect thing, but your partner is like self-conscious about her belly, right? So she's putting her hand on her belly and she doesn't want to look fat when she's fucking you the first time. If you know how to read those body language, you go like, honey, you're beautiful, and then kiss her belly. That would be more effective than you having like the best sex move. So you have to kind of able to read those situations better. So it really depends, but I think the things that people need to work on is open their mind to how to understand women better, right? And have the willingness to learn, at not just the technique side of things, but understand why each individual is unique, just like all men are unique as well.
Now let's just take a quick break here to give you a quick note about my affiliates. I've set up some awesome deals with some amazing companies. If you go to www.nextlevelguy.com/affiliates, that's www.nextlevelguy.com/affiliates, or click on the affiliates deal in the blue ribbon at the top of the website homepage, you can go straight to my affiliate wonderland. There you'll find so many special offers, listener exclusive deals, and discount codes available. There really is something for everyone here. It doesn't matter if you're buying for yourself, a special occasion, or someone else in your life. You can find whatever you need there, and so much more. There's a lot of inspiring companies and interesting products you might not have seen before. Page features companies like Onnit, Amazon, MeUndies, Barbell Apparel, Dollar Shave Club. There's stuff there that can help you with dating, sport and equipment. There's tactical gear, there's outdoor equipment, there's gadgets and gizmos, and so much more. If you need it, it's there, and there's stuff there that you never even knew you wanted, but you'll definitely need it when you see it. Simply go to www.nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and enjoy. Please note, I don't receive any information on you or your purchases. All I receive is a small commission from the company or the business as a thank you for sending you to shop with them. This doesn't affect the price you pay, but it helps me to develop and expand the podcast by using the affiliate sales commissions to then expand on the podcast. So I'm extremely thankful for you to taking the time to spend your money via my links. You're helping me make this podcast bigger and better each week. I'm becoming a better person by doing so, by using these amazing products. Simply go to www.nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and enjoy. And now let's get back to the interview. So, do you go from the approach of how the person's acting in the moment, and do you have like a set sort of things of when I start in a certain position, I'll use my vocal tonality to, tell her to call me sir and things like that? Do you have like set?
No set, like, I mean, it might sound cheesy, but being like, I grew up in Hong Kong, and being an Asian American in the US, I just I love Bruce Lee's philosophy. And his whole philosophy is that you can't do fixed moves on everybody, because it, like, when you're on a street fight, you're not going to rehearse some movement that you could adapt to that person. So your goal is to able to develop everything at the same time, like be in the moment and be like water. Like that is so if people are looking for recipe, like if you know how to cook one thing and that's the only thing you could serve, you just have to, it's a probability game. Some people might love it and some people might hate it. But if you have basic cooking skills that you know how to make a range of things, and you could like ask the person what they like and cook it. So there's no one, but there is a sequence to things. Like that person have to feel safe and comfortable. They have to be in their parasympathetic nervous system in order to get arousal. They have to be paying attention. So there's principle that doesn't change, just like gravity and physics. So you have to know those things, but ultimately you have the skills to how to follow those principles.
That's awesome. Because usually they teach certain moves. Some of these other sort of companies I've seen, it's, when you're in doggy style, you lift this and move that, and you think, yeah, that's fine. I mean, like I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and you see certain people who have never rolled against an opponent. They've only drilled the technique, and then suddenly when you're in a roll with somebody who knows that technique and they move in a different way to defend against it, the person doesn't know what to do because they've never adapted, they've never gone, they've never been in that moment. And I think it's similar. You're not fighting the other person.
Very similar. It's very similar to martial art. Like erotic art and martial art is very similar in that sense. And the tricky thing is about techniques and drill. Like you're supposed to develop things so you could forget about them. Like you can consciously think about like your moves, because then you're awkward and robotic. So the thing about like training and developing skill is that you develop it enough until it becomes you. So you could be in the present moment. So I think the faster you learn those tools and skill early part of your sex life, the easier for you later when you don't have to think about it.
So something I did absolutely love with your stuff, it's the data, it's the flow charts. Like your videos are amazing. When I was watching some of your new course, for example, the way that you've broken it down into different steps and the introduction and the explanation of things, was this the analytical side of you coming out? Because you explain everything so well and you give everybody the things to do in certain situations, but you also explain the theory behind it of how to build that connection, how to get them into that zone to start. And then you don't just say, do this, do that. You say, here's the tools, this is about building your connection, about your experience. When you're working with people, how do you work with a couple? How do you go about actually getting them into this and understanding? How do you get through their initial kind of, oh, there's somebody else in the room? How do you get them into that kind of zone you were talking about?
It's funny. Initially, you would think men would have such an ego when it comes to this, and sometimes they do, right? Like it might feel intimidating and all that stuff. Ultimately, a lot of people are thirsty for guidance and knowledge. Like they want to learn. So when I find the right client that who's like actually want to be better, and there's such an appreciation from like when I work with couple, when the woman is like, oh my god, I'm so like, I'm so glad that you're willing to do this with me. The level of appreciation their partner give them is tremendous. And I always tell them, look, you guys been married for 10 years. I don't know her body as well as you do. I'm just kind of showing you a process of how to learn and develop your own skills, where I'm giving you the science. So ultimately, what they're practicing in, they just get to leverage my like understanding, but I'm showing them literally how to adapt, to their partner in the moment.
So when would you start doing things where, do you have a base like acceptance of what you need to see before you would start, introducing toys and sort of expanding into like kinks they want to try and BDSM and things like that? Do they need, or do you want to see the connection first, the general skills? Or are you happy to kind of go in and say, do you work with them and say what they want to try and take it from there? How do you work with them?
With a client, obviously, I would ask a lot more questions about like their sexual history, their preference, their desire, and etc. But in a general like sexual situation, there's sometimes not a lot of time to get an in-depth like interview and all the information you do like a podcast. So I kind of broke down that communication into either the person is getting a chef special, like their preference, like let me see what you got. That's one version. The other version is that it's a tasting menu. So it's you get to pick something from their menu. So like, I want to try this thing with you. I want XYZ. Or the third one is that the person who's receiving get to dictate, exactly how they want things, and you're just like doing the thing they want. So people need to establish their preference and how they like to negotiate that. But if they don't have the knowledge to make those distinctions, they don't know how to navigate it. So the default is that nobody communicating and just a roll of the dice. So when I play with someone new or someone been with forever, do you want me to do what I think you like what I got, or do you want to see what you want to learn more about what I could give, or do you want to tell me exactly how you like it? Give them choices, so then they could choose.
And how would you overcome like people being jealous or upset, or like say they want to go and try going to a sex party, for example? How would you work with a guy to overcome jealousy or worrying about other people with their partner? Because that's a big thing, is like when you watch sex, everybody's so open, or when you watch porn, everybody's so open and ready for everything, but there's always somebody that has that kind of reservations.
I think yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, is that something you can overcome, or are they just not ready for that kind of environment?
I think I think the brain is quite flexible. Feelings are feeling. I think it's important to honor them. I think it's also important to examine them. Like, is it my insecurity that's driving this experience, or am I I'm infatuated with this girl? I'm in my current chemical state that makes me more single-minded. I think, able to both feel your feeling and trying to examine and understand them is important. And then you get to choose what feelings are important to you. I don't think everybody needs to be open and share. Some people, monogamy works incredibly well for some people, and monogamy also could be a nightmare for a lot of people. So I think really I think the most important work is actually self-knowledge and really understand yourself, and then to have the willingness to understand your partner as well and see where you are compatible and where you are not. When I work with couples, I always say, look, let's find out where your authentic desire is, see where you guys are compatible, and work on the lowest hanging fruit first. And then there's times when you kind of rotate different needs between two people. Sometimes one party get to be exclusively selfish and one party be selfless, and vice versa. So there's opportunity for all those things to be expressed, rather than like you have to like everything. So just say if you like comedy and I like horror film, right? Like, we could rotate, or we could see an action film together where we kind of both like it a little bit. So it depends, and that ratio is really depends on the couples. But when you find someone who's really compatible, you will have an easier time, just like life.
I mean, I was really interested when I read that, like, people were talking about what they actually, I think somebody wrote an article about you coming into their bedroom and doing things, and
when you hear of a sex coach or a sex hacker, you immediately go, "Oh, he was standing over you, going, lift that leg, pull that there." And I love this kind of level that you do it on. That you're not just coming out and saying, "This is my view, and this is the XYZ moves to be done." And I can see why you've been so successful. Your approach to it, just the way you talk about it is so relaxing and soothing, but it actually inspires people. But do you find the problem with things like porn? Are you a fan of that? Do you think it's taught guys the wrong attitude towards sex, like just being jackhammers? Or has porn kind of also helped ladies kind of see that there is different versions of sex that they can open up? Guys can see that thing that turns them on is acceptable, that there is videos, there is an interest, there's comments, there other people are into it. It's not just a sordid secret. What's your opinion on porn?
It's a tough one because, when you are, how porn company develop their content is based on view, right? Like how popular is this thing? So if this thing is more popular, you make more of it. And there's a thing about repetition. Like if you see something over and over again, so you would more tendency to think that this is how it's supposed to be done. And when we talked about earlier, when we use porn as our sex education or what we perceive the world to be. Now, I've been in porn. I did it. Like I seen it. I experienced it. It's a performance-based thing. They're just doing it for the camera. It's not necessarily for their performers' experience. And that's why it was so important to me that any content I make, there's no fake orgasm, there's no crazy movie magic at it. It has to be real. And I tell my performers, I don't want you to fake anything. Like we're trying to teach. So I want you to show me all the awkward moments, all the like, this doesn't work, and tell me what you like, rather than I supposed to be a sex god that I could read your mind, because that's not how reality works. So I think in order to combat that, I think the future of sex education is really porn, or porn-like, so people could consume a more perspective rather than just seeing a performance-based thing.
So one of the things I'm sort of interested in is when I learn new techniques and things like that, I sometimes can get stuck into my own head, and I'm not actually in the moment. I'm not kind of, like if I'm in jiu-jitsu, I'm thinking like pull the sleeve, twist the leg, sit on their hip or whatever. How do we avoid becoming so, thinking through the instructions, thinking through all this kind of stuff? How do we make sure that we're still in the moment, but remembering these techniques? Is it just like muscle memory, just kind of trial and error, seeing how people react to it, or?
No, yes and no. So the first thing is that you don't need to treat every sexual experience as like a performance. Mm-hmm. So I encourage all my students to create play labs when you intentionally set up a time to learn, where like mistakes and calibration is embraced and celebrated.
Love that.
So then you could separate the time and doing it. And then also, I think because sex, we put so much of our ego and the fear of failing creates so much anxiety. So I actually talk them through the stages of learning. So the first stage is, you're unconscious incompetent. You don't even know that you don't know, like you're doing something wrong. And then you will get to conscious incompetent. Then you get to conscious competence, where you're doing something right, but you're paying attention so much that you're not in your experience. Then you eventually land on unconscious competence. Is where I want everyone to lead to. But you do have to go through those steps. But it doesn't take that long. It's like learning how to ride a bike. That's like one semester worth of like education that I think most men would so benefit for their entire life. If they just spend one semester worth of time, develop each skill, like one assignment at a time, they be like amazing lover for the rest of their life. And they're so much better than the average bro that is so worthy of their investment.
I mean, talking of investments, I've got some stuff that I have here, for use with partners and stuff. Unfortunately, when I was moving flat, my parents discovered the box when they're helping me move. But, like things like handcuffs, blindfolds, all these kind of toys and accessories. Are there things that you think all guys should have? Or is that a kind of, you have to get to know the person, you have to get that connection to introduce? Like for guys that are into that kind of stuff, how can we possibly, in a hookup situation, how do you do that without the person running a mile? Like, if you want to introduce toys and things like that, should guys have like a certain type of equipment, like wipes and all that?
Absolutely. I think, that's what separates their not like average than their pros. So in that sense, that you always have like loops, and I mean, like small things, like always have tampons and like new underwear that someone else could wear. It's good sex etiquette. That's like my base view. And when it comes to toys, on my website, I have recommended only things that I personally use. So it's an assortment of things, but there's some general theme, like the Android is super useful, having a good vibrator, having good lube, having good gloves, and like it depends on what you're trying to do. So if you have, basically it's about enhancing the experience. So if you're kinky, like if I'm a guy who's kinky, I want to find a partner who's into kink. I don't want to, my desire is not compatible with that person. I wouldn't like drop it on them in the moment. I would go like, yeah, I'm kind of kinky. So I think when the guy embrace their own sexuality and talk about their own preference, they could really find that person that they really desire first, that they're compatible with. Then they could just do the thing that they mutually desire. So it really comes down to their sort of dating mating process. But I think having some baseline stuff is super important.
And because that's what I think I like about your stuff as well, is where you said earlier about just don't be a dick. That probably covers like the after sex stuff. It's like, don't just tell her, oh, get a taxi. Is actually treat the person like a human being, and like make sure they're okay, and just check every, even if it's just you're just friends with benefits and stuff like that. It's this whole kind of thing of they can't stay over, they must go straight after. You can't offer them to stay and have a quick drink, to check everybody's okay and that. And these are the kind of myths that you wish would just die? Are these the things that are really hurting sex, in your opinion?
I think bad behavior, just bad behavior. I don't think people need to follow one specific script. So if you have a very strong boundaries that none of your lover like stays over, then like let the person know before they opt into the situation. So I think anyone could set whatever boundary they want to have. But being a good communicator about those boundaries, I think the fucked up things people do is they act all nice and they get laid and they become a dick. Like that switch is what drives people crazy. If you go like, look, I'm here to fuck, and then after fucking I'm gonna send you home, and she's like, I love that, then you could just do the thing you want to do. So there's no one like behavior pattern. As long as it's agreeable by two adults, consenting adult, you're all good.
Love it. I mean,
so it really depends.
Well, I've still got thousands of more questions. I mean, I love your approach to it, because when I went onto your videos, I was blown away at the quality. It's like even just each of the different styles of like oral, then penetration and different styles. You broke it down. You explain the philosophy, but you also show the physical movements. You show different techniques that people can live. Like your quality of your products is phenomenal. It's like beyond what I comprehend. And I was watching it, and I was picking up little tips and like amazing things. But you made me start thinking about sex on a deeper level, about connection, and you're helping make better men as much as better lovers, and that's probably the best compliment I can give you.
Thank you.
Where do you want your products to go? What's the evolution of your company? You're building an amazing brand. You've got the villa. You're part of the Casual Sex Project. What do you want it? Where do you want to go with this? How do you want to bring this sex evolution to the world? How can you get your message out to more people?
I mean, I'm really inspired to normalize sex education. That it's an investment, that same way people invest into their health, into their fitness, into their nutrition, into their financial future. I think sexuality and sexual wellness is equally important as having mental health. So if I could really get that message out and promote like sexual wellness and education, do the videos I make. And I think online sex education is really important because most people, the next generation coming up and the generation now will have, that's where they get to access that like immediately. And so I think it's important for a sex educator and content producer to provide the best content out there. And that's why I was so obsessive about like able to, not just make a video with my iPhone, but like trying to show all the angle, add diagram, add science and all those things. Because when I was in the fitness industry, the quality of fitness education is so much better, for that domain. So why can't we apply the same principle and what we learn in that industry into this industry? So I brought a lot of my fitness experience into producing high quality sex ed, so people could like see it from all different angle and able to learn and understand the concept and ultimately able to apply it. Because it's one thing to see it, like they absorb the info. It's another thing to acquire the skill. So I was obsessed about like how do I help someone acquire the skill.
I love that way of looking at it, because it's like you're saying, if I wanted to deadlift better or squat better, I just go on YouTube and there's 90 million videos and they're all great quality. But if I put in how to fuck better, I usually get Pornhub coming up or something like that, and it's some situation or scenario that they've built where the girl gets pile drived by the guy at the end. And, people kind of watch and go, well, right, that's what women want. So they go off and do it. And it's completely, I love that you're building a culture and an environment that people can actually discuss it and talk about it and realize that thing they're turned on by is acceptable, that they can ask for better quality, they can ask for better sex, they can, like, women can be open and about their wanting to just have sex and not be married to guys, and all these myths are what they are, just myths and bullshit. And you're creating that. I mean, that's what I love about it. How do you start? I mean, are you going to start doing more online video classes? Are you going to, like, how do you keep building this? What's the plan for the business?
I just released the Sex Hacker Pro course, which incorporate all the things that I've been trying to put together. And we've been working like 2 years nonstop and putting everything into a sort of a system so people could learn it in the skill tree. But I think more importantly for the next year, I really want to talk to men that they see their sexuality or their self-worth way more than their size of their penis and how long they could last. Because I see all this industry gaming on that side of the insecurity instead of giving them something that they could actually work on. And one of the messages that is dear to me is that I don't want men think that they're developing the skill to compensate for something they think they lack. Because most people are perfectly fine. The unfortunate thing is that because of the porn industry, you only see a very small percentage of human which has a porn star cock, right? And how the film is created. So you believe that this is good sex, which is not for a lot of women, right? So for the men who's thinking they are not enough, right? So they feel like, they have this mindset is like, I am fucked because no matter how I work on it, I still have what I have. So I'm never going to be good enough. And those are the men that I really want to reach, because I want to tell them that it has nothing to do with those things that you were born. It doesn't matter if you are 5'6" or like 6'5", or you have a cock that is 5 inches versus 10 inches. It's really about who you are connecting with and your skill and your belief in yourself, rather than there's something that's inherently wrong with you. So to me, is that it's equally important for me to inspire people to believe that they're enough to invest in themselves versus just learning a technical thing.
Yeah, I love that, because you're teaching people it's not about looks. It doesn't matter if you've got a six pack or things are jiggling, and bouncing where like you normally wouldn't be. You're teaching people that they can be, they can get what they want or what they desire. You don't need a six pack and be built like a brick shit house like some of these guys in pornos and stuff like that. And I love the message you're putting out there. I mean, we've just gone over an hour and it feels like 5 minutes. I would love to have you on again in the future at some point whenever our schedules can meet. But what do you want people to take from that? Is that the message that you do you're entitled. You can get this regardless of who you are and where you're
Definitely, I
starting
mean,
from.
different than entitlement. So entitlement is that you think you have, like, you deserve it without character. I think it's really important to develop character, develop kindness, and develop your skills. But I think the ultimate message is that you are enough, that you hopefully you're willing to invest in yourself and care about women's pleasure. I think is the world is so lacking that right now. And I really want to see where, that's why I work with so many women in my product, is that the message is like, if they're getting what they want from men, it's really a better world. I think the fight between the sexes is harming everyone. So I think if we learn how to treat each other better, and there's still a lot of things to learn, with my own mistakes about how to be with women. So I think we keep adapting, like this very like nurturing and forgiving and empowering and loving each other instead of just demonizing like either sexes is really important for our growth. And I think that's the message that we want for the next generation, instead of continue to polarizing everything. I think like uniting like everybody so we could all have a good time and care about each other is important.
I love that. Yeah, you're right. This thing about men versus women and women rights and feminism and being the devil and all this kind of crap. It's put this divide between men and women, and at the end of the day, it's pointless. It's just self-destructing us. Like, we're all people at the end of the day, and that's why I get disgusted when I see racism, sexism, stuff like that, because we're creating these imaginary boundaries when we're a people at the end of the day. I mean, you do put yourself out there. You're very open, and your products are about sex, so obviously. But what's an unusual fact about yourself? I love asking this as a sort of second last question. Is there anything about you that really surprises people when they hear it? Do you have an unusual talent? Interest in something? Is there something that kind of blows people away after you tell them you're a sex hacker? Is there something like a surprising fact that you love to give out?
I'm actually quite like artsy and creative, so I love like cooking and I love doing like installation art for sex parties. Like there's a part of me that like curating experiences, and I think some people find that unusual. But I think because of sometimes when you're a sex educator and you're making things like online talking about sexual pleasure, they think I would have such an ego about this thing. In fact, that I actually don't want that title. I don't want, like, I actually don't like fucking fans or like girls who think I'm so good in bed. Creates this artificial pressure that I'm like there to like wow them and blow their mind, which doesn't create this authentic connection that I so value. So to me is that like I just want to be myself and like express myself honestly, like on the Bruce Lee side of things, and find people who mutually enjoy each other. So people usually think I would have such an ego about this thing. Like what they find is I'm actually like, I don't have that much of an ego about this. The part that I have an ego about is that I'm like very passionate about their education, the science, and not like mix some false belief into reality. But other than that, it's really just like, I'm really about being in the flow of things.
Well, if I had to say to anybody listening, I mean, obviously there's been so many gems, from yourself, but for guys listening, you really need to go and get a copy of Kenneth's latest products. I was blown away by the quality. I mean, I'm probably more like I've experienced quite a bit of different styles of sex, and using handcuffs and all that stuff, and it's still everything. It just blew me away. There were so many tricks, techniques, attitudes towards sex, little movement changes, how to connect better with your partner. So many things. There's something there for everybody, regardless of how many people you've been with, etc. But this is your perfect chance now, kind of to. The floor is open to you. How can people keep in touch? But what products would you recommend? Where can people start? How can people join the casual sex movement? How can people come to these sex parties? And what should people expect? How can you start them on your journey?
Well, they could definitely go to my website at kenplay.com and then check out my latest courses. Actually, they're in, like, I'm so happy that I have their opportunity based on the success of the first program, that all my fans empower me and gave us enough money to reinvest every dollar that we have earned to make the second one that just got released 2 days ago. And more importantly, what I want is that I want people to pay me when they're happy and satisfied with what I created. So as long as you, for any reason at any time, lifetime, that you decided that it wasn't worth your time, you didn't get what you want out of it, I'm happy to give your money back without any question. But what I do want people to do is able to kind of invest and learn and see if there's something that, they have a willingness to try it on. So it's one thing to watch it and another thing to try it. So I really want to encourage people to try it and really take on their lives. As far as like Casual Sex Project and Sex Party, there's different sex positive community all over the world. I happen to be one of the co-founder for one in Brooklyn, and the website is wearehacienda.com. And you can find more about our events and party. And a little bit on that is that if you want to experience the best possible sex in your life, I think connecting with other people, even if you're not trying to have sex with them, when you're involved with a sex positive culture, it has such a tremendous effect on you. So if you're with a bunch of people who have very negative sex view, it will affect the rest of your sex life. So I really encourage people to make at least one friend who is sex positive. It will have a significant impact in the way you look at sex.
That's it for another week. Thanks for listening. Absorb it, practice it, use it. Until next time, keep trying to hit that next level in your life.